radical left has taken over the Democratic Party.
Hello and welcome to Think Progressively, covering politics and all the other chaos life has to offer. This is episode 24, recorded on Friday, February 12th from Milwaukee. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jason.
And on today's episode, we will talk about the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump. But first, the headlines.
The fact is that everything he's saying so far is simply a lie. I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
Up first in headlines, a new Ipsos and ABC poll finds that 2/3 of Americans are positively responding to Joe Biden's coronavirus plan. That's good news.
Yeah, the plan I don't think has changed a whole lot. It's the message and the delivery of that message. Someone who seems to actually care about the coronavirus pandemic and
electing experts and making sure, competent people actually handle this stuff.
Yes.
And I don't know actual polling on it, but I'm sure there's a good approval rating of Dr. Fauci. And the fact that Dr. Fauci's a part of this coronavirus team, working hand in hand with Joe Biden as opposed to in conflict like he was with Donald Trump, I think that also does a lot too. So that's really good. I also think that a lot of this may be circumstantial, where I know there's a lot of barriers and obstacles that the Biden administration is going through right now because they're trying to actually pass a lot of this $1.9 trillion bill, or the plan, through the budget reconciliation process, which doesn't get a lot of press outside of the news sphere. So I think a lot of people will start disapproving of his pandemic response if they don't start seeing checks and things happening relatively soon.
It's what they promised. It's what voters voted for in Georgia.
Good news is that Biden did just announce that he purchased 200 million additional doses of the coronavirus vaccine from both Pfizer and Moderna. So, things are being done. The plan is working. We just have to actually get there.
On a local level, Wisconsin went from one of the lowest states
garbage
of vaccine rollout up near the top now.
A lot of my relatives are still waiting to get their vaccine because of the shortage still, though.
Yeah, that's happening everywhere.
Right, so which is what's going to happen.
But we are seeming to make big strides.
Right,
lately.
But things are at least happening. I think that's why people are approving of what Biden's doing now, because they at least see things happening. If they stop seeing things happen, they're going to start getting angry.
It's good to have a president who's not openly hostile to your state during this vaccine rollout.
You're right.
Also from Georgia, the office of the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, confirmed to CNN on Monday that it has started an investigation into former President Donald Trump. It feels good just to say the former part there. His attempts to overturn the state's election results, including the phone call that we all listened to that he made with Raffensperger.
But that's not even the best part, Jason, because literally the next day, Georgia prosecutors opened a criminal investigation into that same exact call, which is amazing.
That is the famous, I just want you to find the votes I need to win in Georgia.
The 11,780 votes. Nothing specific or anything.
Perfectly legal thing to ask.
And this will be a very slow process. This is going to be an internal investigation that was just announced. So wait for this patiently, because who knows when we're actually going to get results for this, especially coming out of Georgia, of all places, too. But this is great news. And I think the fact that Georgia is going to start looking at actual criminal indictments on Donald Trump is great, because Trump is not free from state crimes. While he can be pardoned from federal crimes and he can be pardoned for anything because of the Senate is incompetent beyond all belief, which we'll talk about later in the episode, state crimes are completely different stories. So for all we know, Donald Trump could actually be going to jail. Probably won't, but it's good to hope.
He could just die too. That would be fine.
All right. That's like resigning before you get your impeachment, though. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want the January exemption of killing yourself before you go.
The Epstein exemption.
Oh, Jesus.
I just meant he could die. He's old, he's out of shape. He could just die.
Oh, okay. And in making our country worse in the name of God news, our Supreme Court once again doubled down on religious rights by saying that California is not allowed to shut down their churches due to the coronavirus pandemic, like any other organization and company and group and nonprofit that also has to follow those laws.
Well, they always talk about that wall of separation between church and reality.
But this is literally giving religious churches a special exemption, not even just persecution, because that's what, unfortunately, the majority of our freaking U.S. Supreme Court thinks right now, thanks to Amy Coney Barrett. But they're actually giving an exemption to religious organizations who think that if you believe in a weird thing, or you believe in the supernatural and organize around something in the supernatural, you are then exempt from rules that everyone else has to follow for the safety of the entire country.
Hope you don't live in a community that's heavily religious in California. You're at more danger than those who don't.
I mean, well, this isn't even the first time. We've seen this happen with synagogues and other religious institutions in New York.
Yeah, religion should not exempt you from public health laws.
I'm changing the name to elections have consequences for this segment. You should have voted for Hillary Clinton if you didn't. And what's even crazier, and I don't even understand this, is that while they're saying that churches are allowed to gather, they're still limited to 25% capacity, which for some reason, okay, fine. You can still kill each other at 25% capacity, but they kept the singing restrictions in place. So you can go to a place and fully believe in whatever you want to believe for your religion. You're not allowed to sing for it then, based on our laws?
Sure. I was never, even when I went to church when I was a kid, I never did the singing part. It just that's the opportunity to just stare off into space. Pretty much the whole rest of the church too, really.
And I just want to end this with a quote from Justice Elena Kagan, who said, quote, "I cannot imagine that any of us on the court has delved into the scientific research on how COVID spreads or studied the strategies for containing it. So it is alarming that the court second guesses the judgments of expert officials and displaces their conclusions with its own. In the worst public health crisis in a century, this foray into armchair epidemiology cannot end well." God, Elena Kagan's a badass. Wish we had more of her on the Supreme Court. We got Justice Alito and John Roberts and Clarence Thomas. God, for so many more years, Jason.
Well, not so much for Clarence Thomas. Wink, wink.
Sounds like a threat, Jason.
Not a threat.
And as Trump's lawyers also said, you have freedom of speech anyway, so it doesn't matter. You're free from all consequences, Jason.
Well, sticking with the crazy world of religion, we have an article from the Daily Beast in which German nuns are accused of selling orphan children to sex predators.
I don't even know where to even go with this story. This is so screwed up.
So this is a report that comes out of a lawsuit which alleges that orphan boys living in the boarding houses of the Order of the Sisters of the Divine Redeemer were sold or loaned for weeks at a time to predatory priests, which we just call Catholic here in the U.S., and businessmen in a sick rape trade. The men involved in the lawsuit say as boys that they were denied being adopted out or sent to foster families because selling them for rape lined the sisters' coffers for their convent of horrors. Some of the boys were then groomed to be sex slaves to perverts, the report claims. Not a good place to be a good-looking kid, I guess. You want to be the ugly fat kid. Unless somebody's into that, then you don't.
And I just want to read this one quote from the article here. The report names various German businessmen and complicit clergy who, quote, rented the young boys from the nuns who ran a convent in Speyer, Germany between the 1960s and 1970s. Among the worst instances of abuse were gangbangs and orgies the young boys were forced to participate in before being returned to the convent, where the nuns would then punish them for wrinkling their clothing or being covered in semen.
Gotta clean up when you're done.
What even is this?
This is religion. This is Catholicism, Joe. You never heard of it before? Oh my God.
The report found that 175 people, mostly boys between the ages of 8 and 14, were abused over the 2 decades. But it failed to blame the nuns directly, instead saying systematic management errors and leniency errors for those who were accused by the children enabled the abuse to continue.
Which is somewhat true. I mean,
what are systematic management errors?
It was a seemingly common practice for Catholic priests to abuse children and get away with it. I'm fine with that argument. I'd be like, yeah, they're right. We should actually tear down the entire Catholic Church because apparently it's one giant child sex ring.
Jason, I've worked for a lot of companies that had systematic management errors. It did not lead to selling boys into sex slavery.
Yeah, but you also had to pay taxes at those companies too, so it's not exactly a direct comparison here.
Don't join the Catholic Church. That's all I gotta say.
Definitely don't donate at your local church, because it's like the mob. They all kick up to the boss. And even though they might not be abusing children at that church, they're paying people who have over decades and decades abused children and covered it up and enabled further abuse of children.
It goes on to say in the report that Bishop Karl-Heinz Weitzman, who now leads the Archdiocese, said that their abuse report was so gory, it was too shocking to be made public. Are you kidding me?
Anything to hide the truth.
Oh,
Man. Well, the Archbishop here in Milwaukee that presided over one of the largest abuse scandals in America is now a cardinal. So it just goes to show, if you want to get ahead in the Catholic Church, you're going to have to cover up some sex abuse.
I'm so angry at this report. I am so angry. Jason, I was not as angry when we started the segment, but I'm like fuming now.
It's nothing new for me.
I know, but it makes me so angry.
It's been multiple countries, multiple decades, multiple popes. Burn it all down.
The only good thing I see with this article right now is the fact that I see Rob Gronkowski supporting CBD medication. That's the only thing I care about right now.
Super Bowl winning again, tight end Rob Gronkowski. We were both wrong about that one.
Oh my God.
Don't make any sports bets based on our recommendations.
Oh God, don't. You'll lose so much money. Jason, I don't want to talk about this. I don't care.
You don't want to talk about
I don't care.
The biggest news story of the week?
We had a whole episode dedicated to this already, Jason. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm done.
We are, of course, talking about cancel culture.
Oh, I was talking about Star Wars.
Well, it's the same thing, right?
Star Wars is cancel culture.
That's what all of the neckbeards on YouTube are telling me. Mandalorian co-star Gina Carano got fired from Disney and Lucasfilm for comparing the treatment of Jews in Nazi Germany to how Republicans are treated online.
It's so dumb. It's so stupid, Jason. I hate this. I hate that this is a controversy. I hate that we have to talk about this again. I don't want to deal with this because all their arguments are bullcrap. I'm done. I hate it. And I don't even know who Gina Carano is. I've never even heard of her. I don't watch The Mandalorian. I don't have Disney Plus.
I don't have Disney Plus, but I do watch The Mandalorian. Don't come at me, mouse.
I heard good things about the show, though.
It's pretty good.
Is she a main character?
Semi-main, certainly was becoming a main character. The most conventional wisdom was that she was going to be a star on one of the spin-off shows that's going to be coming out.
Yeah, so I didn't understand that yet. So they were going to have a spin-off show of a spin-off? Because The Mandalorian is a spin-off, isn't it?
No, The Mandalorian is a new series. But it's the first of the new like Star Wars TV shows. And it was very popular, so now they're going to launch 15 other ones.
Because why not?
And one of those was going to be Rangers of the New Republic, of which her character is, and everyone assumed that she would be the main focus, or at least one of the main focuses of that show. But they didn't really commit to that in December when they had their like reveal of all of these things. And she had been definitely controversial in the past. She had put beep, boop, bop as her pronouns on Twitter, which caused some friction with the show's star, the titular Mandalorian, Pedro Pascal, who explained to her that she's actually denigrating a vulnerable segment of the population, and she did. I don't know so much as apologize, because she never said she apologized, but she said that he talked to her and explained to her why people use pronouns and why she shouldn't make fun of it, so she removed that. But she's been a very outspoken conservative. She's tweeted a lot of anti-mask propaganda, some election conspiracy theories. So I think Disney was kind of looking for
So she's a crazy
excuse.
person is what you're telling me.
She is a conservative, as she says. So I think Disney was looking for an excuse to get rid of her because...
What's Disney?
Yeah, they're a business, and they're in the business of making all the money. And they don't want somebody who is going to create controversy and create public backlash.
Now, Jason, though, I remember in our free speech episode that when we looked at the Constitution, there was an actual right to having a role on a Disney Plus show.
It's, Article 3, free speech, the First Amendment there.
You just see, like, Trump, like, draw on it with, like, Sharpie.
Ken has Mandalorian.
Ken.
So she, after tweeting and there was a little bit more of that. It was like the Nazis didn't beat Jews. Their neighbors beat them in the streets because it was public sentiment that turned against them. And that's exactly what's happening today with conservatives. Public sentiment is being turned against them by the government, I guess.
What?
She doesn't understand that, no, it's your opinions are not popular because a lot of people find them offensive or harmful, especially in like the anti-mask. You're literally causing potential harm to public safety. So people are upset about that. Everybody's got the right to express that they're unhappy with your opinions.
Oh my God! Of
That's
course,
how that free speech thing goes both ways.
and of course, Ted Cruz weighed in on it because why not? Let's make this worse. What did he even say?
And I quote, Texan Gina Carano broke barriers in the Star Wars universe.
Did she?
No, not a princess, not a victim, not some emotionally tortured Jedi. She played a woman who kicked ass and who girls looked up to. I wish Carrie Fisher was still alive because, yes, she was a princess, but Princess Leia kicked ass and girls looked up to her and boys.
Well, now hold on. Didn't we have this exact same conversation in reverse back when, when like Rey was the main character of the Star Wars movies, where they're saying that to have a girl who kicks ass as a main character is just like feminist wokeism?
Oh, people made the same complaint against Gina Carano's character when she debuted.
Oh
as well.
my God.
And it's literally the same people who are now
angry
saying
that she's gone.
Yeah, never watch because they found out she's a conservative. You can find it. You can look it up. The quartering, all those neckbeard douchebags.
I hate all of this. I hate all of this thing. Why did you put this on your script? I hate this.
Things are looking up for poor Miss Carano. She
Why?
moved from working from the mouse to working for the chipmunk. She has been hired by Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire.
For what?
To produce and star in an upcoming Daily Wire movie.
What are they going to do?
They've been putting out movies. That's like their new big thing. They just released, it's not a movie that they made, but one that
about the
they
school
purchased.
shooting?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Basically the Die Hard in a school shooting scenario, where John McClane is a kid, because that's realistic. That's what you want to teach kids. If a school shooting ever happens at your school, don't follow the procedure, which why we even have to have procedures for that. Who knows?
Now, this is kind of a side. Did you see that Ben Shapiro saw his reviews on that from like Rotten Tomatoes tank so hard that he had to make a video just to say like
it's cancel culture, Joe.
Well, right. It's like if you have a bad reviews on your movie, you did something right. Like, what is that? Oh my God. Of course Ben Shapiro hired her. Of course she's going over there. Fine, whatever. I don't care. Go be with your conservatives, and I'm going to have my own movies and have blackjack and hookers.
But you know who the real oppressed minority is in this situation?
White men.
Me.
Oh.
Well, I am a white
you
man,
are a
but
white
me
man.
Specifically, because I had a hilarious tweet in relation to this that I got 0 likes on, and that's why I don't use Twitter, and I hate the internet.
You should have used it with our Think Progressively Twitter account. You have got so many more.
Many more ignoring me. So you don't know. If you said you've never heard of Gina Carano, you don't know. But my tweet was, Disney should have just had her fight a cyborg. We never would have heard from her again. Nothing, huh? It's hilarious, Joe. It's hilarious.
I don't get it.
Gina Carano started off as an MMA fighter.
Oh, did she?
Yes. She was literally the first face of female MMA. This is pre-Ronda Rousey. This is before the UFC even had a women's division.
Okay.
On Showtime, there was a promotion called Elite XC, which eventually got purchased by Strikeforce. Gina Carano was their big female star. She was undefeated. I think she was like 4-0, at least the stuff that I saw on TV. She did have problems making weight, and this might have kind of led to her eventually stop fighting, but she fought Christina Giustano. I'm probably saying that wrong or pronouncing it wrong. It's been a long time since I've heard her name, but AKA Cyborg, and she got her face destroyed, and she never fought again. Her professional career is basically like 7 wins and 1 loss.
She got her face destroyed, and she became a Hollywood actress?
Well, I mean, it healed, but like you saw with Ronda Rousey, if you've ever watched the fights that at least the first fight that she lost. Yeah, so it's hilarious to say she should have just fought a cyborg. You never would have heard from her again, because that's exactly what happened with her MMA career. It's genius. Thank you very much. I'll take all the likes and all the retweets now. So I'm the real...
I'll make sure I retweet it with our official handle so everyone can see it. All like 4 people.
So I'm the one being oppressed here.
Okay. Can we move on to something like more important?
Let's move on to our main story.
All right, let's go do it.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it? It's hard to get any word in with this clown.
on to our main segment and something that's so much more interesting than Gina Carano. I mean, it kind of is. It's the second Senate impeachment trial.
I didn't fall asleep watching The Mandalorian.
Oh.
I fell asleep watching the impeachment trial.
Yeah, but we're going to talk about it anyway because it's exciting. Damn it. Let's do it. So, Jason, let's talk about what was being discussed. Can you tell us what article of impeachment they were arguing over?
Certainly, while I bring up the exact wording, I know it's incitement to violence. Incitement of insurrection is the single article of impeachment this time.
Extremely narrow. Basically, it focuses on the January 6th events, obviously, and some of Trump's behavior and conduct before January 6th, trying to obstruct the certification of the election results. They have a little bit about his Georgia call that we talked about earlier with Brad Raffensperger, and then just overall his crazy conspiracy theories that led to violence and chaos.
I like the part that says he's demonstrated that he will remain a threat to national security, democracy, and the Constitution if allowed to remain in office, and has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law.
Yeah, that about sums it up. So today is Friday, and unfortunately, you're going to see some results that we actually don't know about when you hear this episode. So we apologize for that in advance, but just welcome to the news. It happens.
Unlike the Super Bowl, I feel like I can correctly predict what's going to happen.
I mean,
here.
me too, though. Take political bets from this podcast, not sports bets. Don't take political bets either. We don't want to get sued. So the impeachment trial overall lasted about 4 days. 5 want to include the vote that's going to happen tomorrow on Saturday. And I want to go through kind of what each day really consisted of, what the arguments were, and let's laugh at the chaos that was the defense of Trump. That sound good to you, Jason?
I think that's what we're here for.
All right, let's do it. So day one, opening arguments. This was actually argued about the jurisdiction of the impeachment trial. Was it constitutional, or is it constitutional to actually have a conviction of a former president? Because as of right now, Donald Trump is not president. Now, you may have heard us talking about this exact topic before because the Senate actually voted already on the jurisdiction and receiving the articles of impeachment on January 26th. This was the vote that you may have heard Rand Paul going around on all the Sunday shows, claiming that this was completely unconstitutional and that he's going to try to get a whole base of Republicans together to reject this completely unconstitutional, anti-American, politically motivated impeachment inquiry, all that fun stuff. And that vote passed 55 to 45 among mostly party lines, with 5 Republicans jumping ship to say that this was in fact constitutional.
Yep. House impeachment manager, Democratic representative from Maryland, Jamie Raskin, made the following arguments. They started with a video that's been panned by Republicans for being Hollywood produced and taken completely out of context.
And we'll talk about that too.
Which basically laid out where the crowd was, where the senators were, how everything played out, Trump's speech, what was going on at the time, how quickly things escalated, how long it took for Trump to respond to what was going on, and basically gave you an overall timeline of events for January 6th.
And a little bit of bias is that I actually thoroughly enjoyed the House manager's proposals and arguments in the opening day. So you're going to hear me saying I liked this or that a lot. But I thoroughly did really like how they produced this video of the timeline. I thought they did a great job. If you haven't seen it already, that's kind of the thing that went viral, I'd say, after the first day. It's like 4 or 5 minutes long. It really does a good job of outlining how Congress was actually going through the election results while Trump was simultaneously rallying all the people up to send them towards the Capitol.
Coincidentally, I'm sure.
They're only screaming, "This is for Trump," throughout the video.
And on the basis of, is it constitutional to impeach a no longer sitting president? Raskin argued that if the Senate cannot impeach a former president, this means there is a section of time at the end of their term where they can commit impeachable offenses and have no consequences. This is the exact same argument I made on our last episode.
This is nothing new. Although I did like him calling it the January exception. I think actually giving it like a name really gives it some validity as well. And showing, because impeachments take time. I mean, the idea that we can just rush through impeachment, I think, is kind of ludicrous. And hell, like, we even tried to do that with this president, and it still took several weeks to do. So the fact that we can actually have anything happen in January and then you're not going to supposedly get convicted convicted for it is asinine.
Well, and in this case, December.
Right.
As we talked about, you could also commit many impeachable offenses and then just resign and not face consequences that way as well. And another point that I don't think gets made enough, whose decision was it to wait until Trump was out of office before having this trial?
Democrat.
Who were in control of the Senate at the time. As actually
I'm
Mitch McConnell's decision. So this is the Republicans' big argument against having this impeachment trial is it's happening after Trump is in office, and they were the same ones who made the decision that it would have to wait until after Trump was in office.
I mean, Democrats proposed on doing this right away. They
Correct.
wanted to do this right away.
And
let's keep in mind too that this is also the same crowd of people, the Republican side. I told Jason before, we can't necessarily say it's the Democrats versus the Republicans because it's supposed to be like the pro-conviction and the anti-conviction crowd. But I mean, it's so partisan that this is what it is.
Every impeachment
is.
Yeah.
So, but with Republicans, these are the same people who were saying that Trump could not be indicted while he was president because he was the president. And now they're saying that we can't indict him and convict him because he's not the president.
Yep. Logically inconsistent.
So, and I know we kind of talked about this in our last time we brought up the whole constitutionality of this, but Jamie Raskin did also bring up several examples of William Blunt, where he was disqualified from holding office and then he was expelled after he was already gone from Congress. So that's one example of showing that you can get rid of someone and indict them afterwards. And then they also brought up William Belknap, which was from the 1860s, I want to say, who resigned after being found out he was in a corruption scandal. And the U.S. Senate voted that the Constitution actually required them to proceed with their impeachment trial of Belknap, even though he tried to resign before that anyway. So yes, it is constitutional to convict a former president, especially when their impeachment and what they're getting impeached for happened while they were president. Nearly every single constitutional scholar, even Republican constitutional scholars and lawyers, all agree on this.
And 45 Republican senators still voted that it was not constitutional. That should be your spoiler alert for what's going to happen during the actual conviction vote.
So next up, they brought up the idea of due process. And you'll see a lot of this too. The Democrats did a great job at just basically pre-bunking any of these arguments that the Republicans were going to throw out there. So by the time that the defense actually came around to saying these things, they had nothing to even stand on to begin with. But when it came to due process, they argue that Trump's claim that he can't be convicted because he's now a private citizen is ludicrous. And they kind of went through the whole idea that here is the due process that happened. We followed all the rules. And we even asked if Trump wanted to testify during the trial. And he absolutely refused because he's a coward.
This is not a criminal trial. It's an impeachment hearing.
Yep.
Donald Trump was the president at the time that he committed these acts. That's not hard for anybody. It's not like they don't know this. They just think, well, we just keep saying these things. And then eventually, once this is all over and we vote to acquit him, we'll say it was because of those things that we just kept saying. And who cares? That alleviates them from having to defend any of the president's actual actions. They can say, well, I'm not going to talk about inciting violence and saying that the election was a fraud over and over again to rile up your semi-literate base in order to commit acts of violence against senators. I'm just going to talk about whether or not it was legal to have the trial in the first place. So that's why they're using this defense, because they know that's the most politically expedient thing to do to avoid even talking about the legality of what Trump did. They can just say...
This is a common right-wing trope as well, because whenever you see anything controversial, they always jump right to process. When you ever see a Republican jump right to process, you know they're conceding the argument. So let's move on to the Republican arguments. That was led by lead counsel Bruce Castor.
Lead counsel for the first 2 days anyway.
Yeah. So I was taking notes while listening to his opening statement, and I slowly descended into madness. How did you like his opening, Jason?
I did not watch all of it.
Oh my God.
I've heard people's accounts.
Oh, it hurt. It hurt so bad.
It's like, I'm not going to watch The Room, right? I've heard people talk about it. I kind of understand what happens, but I'm not interested in watching it.
So he introduced himself first as the lead prosecutor. which was just the best start for this whole thing. And then he commended Raskin and the other Democrats for such an outstanding presentation. Oh, okay. Then afterwards, he spends 20 minutes talking about how senators are patriots first. I don't know what this had to do with anything. I don't know why he went on this huge rambling about senators and patriotism, but he would not stop talking about how we should love our country and how the Constitution is a quote unquote good thing. Quote here, if the states didn't adopt the Constitution, then we wouldn't have it.
Yep. And there were only like
you're right.
States at that time too.
You're not wrong. And then after 20 minutes of just mind-numbing nothingness, we get our first argument. Free speech, which I was kind of surprised with. Not the free speech. I knew we were going to talk about free speech right away. But he took such a hard stance on free speech that he started defending Democrats, saying that he was so upset that Democrats had to walk back comments that they made and saying that I would have defended them wholeheartedly because they have free speech to say whatever they want to say. Okay?
And again, this is not a criminal trial. This is an impeachment hearing. It's about if this is an acceptable way for a president to conduct himself. It's not Joe on his podcast inciting violence. It's literally the president of the United States. So I don't like the free speech because traditionally political speech is the hardest defended by freedom of speech, and particularly against incitement to violence, because there is a lot of rhetoric involved in political speech. And when you're a candidate, so be it. How many times did Trump incite violence against people heckling him during any of his rallies? He was never criminally charged for any of that. Mm-hmm. But when you're the president and you literally incite a violent mob attack on the Capitol building because you lost the election and you keep telling everybody that it was stolen from you and that they really should go do something about it, is that conduct unbecoming of a president? Is that impeachable? It's not. Is that a criminal offense? Even though, yes, they use some of the same wording.
I mean, literally, if Barack Obama came out half naked in like a bathrobe or something like that, and a cigar in his hand and like a 40 in the other for his press conference, and just said, "What up, douchebags?" every single day, that's not like...
That would be fun.
That's not breaking the law, but probably he may get impeached if that's the precedent he's setting. So free speech has nothing to do with any of this. And that's idiotic to say so, because when you're... this is the same crap that we're talking about with Gina. Just because you have free speech does not mean you are free from consequences. You could still lose your job, just like Gina did when she got fired from Disney. We need to fire Donald Trump. That's the whole point of this. I'm so angry that there's now a connection between the Gina story and this. I am so upset about that.
Bill Clinton abusing his power as the president to have sex with his intern is not illegal, but it was an impeachable offense. And I think he should have been convicted as well. And it's unfortunate he wasn't, because that is conduct unbecoming of the president and something that should cause you to be removed from office.
And as someone who used to be a free speech absolutist, we really do need to talk about the fact that the idea of free speech absolutism is just unworkable. It doesn't give you the results that you want. Yes, it may sound good in theory, saying that, hey, someone should never have any consequences for what they say because we don't live in any type of totalitarian government. But the idea that you can do whatever you want and say things like you ever want without any consequences for those in a private way or in a non-governmental way is just absurd.
The next argument was the slippery slope fallacy.
Like literally, like that's what he called it.
This will set a bad precedent. Impeachment is supposed to be the last resort.
You know, like when you cite an insurrection against your own Capitol building.
And he's already been impeached once.
Yep.
And has been constantly criticized for his behavior, and it's never changed in 4 years, and it's only gotten worse.
Which just blows my mind, because I want to know what the steps before impeachment were then in their eyes.
Sending him a strongly worded tweet.
So then they spent the rest of the time arguing the already moot point that the Senate should not vote on the jurisdiction. Because again, we already talked about this. The Senate already voted on the idea of receiving these articles a week ago, and accusing Democrats of not trusting the American people to make the right choice to, I guess, not elect Trump again.
He did say the American people aren't stupid. They didn't vote for Trump again.
And he did concede something that President Trump never did, that Biden officially got elected by the American people.
Yeah, that I thought at first when I saw that clip that was the other side. I thought that was the House manager, not the defense. I was like, wow. So not a surprise that guy was not in charge.
And finally, the last argument was, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's basically, well, if Trump actually committed a crime, then go arrest him. If you're not going to arrest him, then shut up.
Yeah, which, of course, the argument that we've been making
is
this
that
whole
it's
time
a political thing.
is not a criminal trial.
So, Jason, I'm sure that Castor and Shane, the other Trump attorney, did such a great bang up job that we lost all of the 5 senators that we did in the first, January 26th vote, right?
Actually, you had another Republican join.
Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy,
who may come up again later on.
Unsuspecting to no one, and I mean that sincerely, actually, Bill Cassidy actually switched his vote to say that this was a constitutional process and that he wanted to hear the arguments for it. He said in an interview later on that the House managers were very organized, relied on legal scholars, and made great arguments, while Trump's lawyers were completely disorganized and did whatever they could to not address the question at hand. And an actual quote from that interview, "Now I'm an impartial juror, and one side is doing a great job, and the other side is doing a terrible job. I'm going to vote for the side who did a great job." Now, technically, that's not how jurors work, but it's better than other Republicans.
Yeah, I hope he's never on an actual jury.
Right.
It's a popularity contest, right? I vote for who I like better. And also that idea of him being an impartial juror. Let's keep that in mind.
Yep.
Bill Cassidy, impartial juror.
And that basically summed up the entire opening arguments for day one. While Trump was still pretty radio silent for most of this, people close to Trump said that he was absolutely fuming and furious with how his defense was.
How come he wasn't tweeting anything?
I wonder why. According to the New York Times article, they asked the person who was close to Trump on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the angriest, how angry was Trump? And they responded with, he's probably at an 8. That's amazing. So let's move on to days 2 and 3. This is where the House managers make their case for the conviction.
They began with playing more footage of the events on January 6th.
And I'll stand by what I said before. You should really watch this footage because there's a lot of footage that they found that wasn't uncovered on January 6th that a lot of the news organizations had. So there's a lot of pretty graphic and shocking footage here.
Representative Stacey Plaskett from the U.S. Virgin Islands,
the first non-voting representative to speak in a Senate trial,
attempted to make the connection between Trump's rhetoric about the election results before January 6th and the insurrection that took place, which I feel should be the main focus. We're not just talking about the speech he made on January 6th. We're talking about everything that led up to that.
Well, and they brought up things like his other previous violent rhetoric, like praising a congressional candidate for physically assaulting a journalist, encouraging demonstrations against the COVID-19 restrictions, quote unquote, liberate Michigan, I think, and liberate Pennsylvania. I think that's the other one too, right? Which ultimately led to the foiled attack on Gretchen Whitmer. And then the whole very fine people on both sides thing, where he was comparing neo-Nazis to anti-fascists.
California Representative Eric Swalwell played security camera footage of Chuck Schumer walking down a hallway with security, only to quickly turn around and run the opposite way to avoid rioters. The security detail can then be seen immediately shutting the doors and blocking it. Definitely would have been in some danger. And the thing is, it's not just the Democrats that were in danger by Trump's words. They were definitely looking to kill Mike Pence.
Yes.
And if you've seen the footage from the airport later where people are following Lindsey Graham and yelling at him, these Republican sycophants were not safe either.
No.
These people consider them all to be complicit in a literal plot to steal the election away from Donald Trump.
There was one part where they actually broke into the Senate chambers that they showed, and it shows a bunch of crazy Trumplicans hovering over Ted Cruz's desk. And one guy goes, "See, look it, right here. This mother bleeper was going to actually, sell us out this entire time." And he actually didn't realize that he was negating and voting against the results, and he just didn't understand how the process worked. So other people had to walk him through the process while he was super angry about Ted Cruz. They're so dumb. They are so dumb.
And it shows that these people are not Republicans who are angry that a Republican president lost an election. These were Trump fanatics.
Yes.
Who were literally doing what they felt Trump was telling them to do.
And moreover, Democrats eventually praised U.S. Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman. You may have seen a lot of pictures or videos of him leading rioters away from a lot of politicians and from the House chambers. There's also other video of him escorting Republican Mitt Romney out as well. So that was pretty cool. And actually, as of today, the Senate unanimously voted to award Officer Eugene Goodman a Congressional Gold Medal.
The only unanimous
The only bipartisan thing that the Senate will ever have, ever.
That I saw in the entire trial. Representative Ted Lieu from California pushed back at the idea that Democrats are only doing this to prevent Trump from running again. That was an argument that was made by the defense that this is not because of
how bad
anything
this was.
anything that Trump did. This is literally just trying to prevent your political opponent from running for office again.
Which is absurd.
Ted Lieu's words were, I'm not afraid of Donald Trump running again in 4 years. I'm afraid he's going to run again and lose because he can do this again, which is true. That is a perfectly reasonable reason to vote to convict Donald Trump.
We already saw that in the election that he won, it was supposedly a rigged election. He didn't stop doing this at all, even though he was winning for a lot of it. So we know that this was going to happen. We knew that this was going to happen months in advance because that's what he said was going to happen.
He multiple times refused to say that he would accept the results and ensure a peaceful transfer of power. That, to me, his multiple statements of not agreeing to a peaceful transition of power, those words exactly, peaceful transition of power, his response was,
I don't know.
The only way I'm going to lose is if they steal the election. That, to me, is enough to show that he incited this violence.
I agree. And then finally, managers argue that the insurrection was done in the name of Trump and not just as a random happenstance. Representative from Colorado, Diana DeJet, discussed messages and posts by members of the Oath Keepers, which is a far-right extremist group that was involved in the January 6th riots. Quote, "It is critical," all caps, "that all patriots who can be in D.C. get to D.C. and stand tall in support of President Trump's fight to defeat the enemies, foreign and domestic." And we've already talked about this, so I'm not going to dive too much into it, but they were shouting Trump's name while they were doing it. They were chanting, "Where's Mike Pence?" They were doing things saying that they were for Trump and that they were stealing the election from Trump. These are Trumpers who are doing this type of thing.
They had Trump flags. They were wearing Trump shirts, Trump hats.
Like
the lady that was killed had a Trump flag tied around her neck like a cape.
Right. Like, these are literally Trumpers. Come on.
And I remember hearing kind of towards the end of it, as everything was quieting down, someone literally saying, "Oh, Trump told us to go home, guys. Let's go home." He did it so late and in such an indirect manner that it was ineffective, obviously, a little too late. And I don't think he did that to actually dissuade the crowd. I think he kind of saw this coming and wanted to try to insulate himself from these consequences.
There was video of a guy with a blowhorn saying Trump's tweets about Mike Pence while the riot was happening.
While people are shouting, "Kill Mike Pence, kill Mike Pence."
And then there's even another video of a guy saying, "Hey, Trump said we did a good job. We should go home." They think they were congratulated by
And
Trump.
they were. He said he loved them, and they should remember this day.
And remember what happens when this elections get stolen, apparently. And that basically summed up the entirety of the second and third days. Trump attorney David Shane talked about how this was a big entertainment thing for them, how they brought in a movie company and a large law firm to make a professional product that took things out of context. He also said, and I quote, "This isn't a blood sport. It's not about entertainment. It's about reporting the facts for the American people." And he also said on Fox News that Trump condemned the violence and the people involved.
Which he most certainly did not condemn the people involved at all.
Which I'm also very sick of this argument too, where they'll say, "Well, he said to do it peacefully peacefully. If you actually meant what you're going to say, or you actually meant that you wanted it to be done peacefully, you have had such a harder stance on what was happening. Do not tell me that, one little we're going to march down there peacefully while you're riling them up for about 2 hours before you send them over to the Capitol.
And months leading up to that.
Get out of here with that nonsense.
And the night after day 3, so Thursday night into Friday morning, Trump defense attorneys met with impartial jurors Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, and Mike Lee.
God, I hate these guys so much.
So they could, strategize for what kind of questions they can ask during the question and answer session, because they're impartial jurors. They're the ones deciding on whether they want to believe the impeachment managers or the defense, and they're already making it very clear what side they're on.
And that brings us to day 4, which is today, Friday, Trump's defense. That was actually scheduled for a 16-hour slot between Friday today and Saturday, but it wrapped up in just about 3 hours, so it's already done.
And they just made the same arguments again. It's not even constitutional to have this trial. This is all a political witch hunt. I believe words that were said were constitutional cancel culture. According to new lead attorney, apparently, Vanderveen, he said, no thinking person could seriously believe that the speech was in any way an incitement to violence or insurrection, as Democratic House impeachment managers have charged. Nothing in the text could remotely be construed as encouraging, condoning, or enticing unlawful activity of any kind. You can't incite what was already going to happen.
That he started.
Yes, because you've already done the job of inciting that violence for days and weeks and months leading up to this. This was Trump's plan. His plan for if he lost the election was to call it a fraud, say it was all rigged, try to get the votes thrown out by issuing 1 million lawsuits, which he lost all of them, and then after that, see if he could force the Senate to not ratify the votes and instead certify their own set of electors. And he needed to do that by using his crazy supporters to physically intimidate the Senate, because it's not constitutional and there's zero precedent for the Senate to just decide, well, the current president doesn't accept the results of the election and he says it's all fake, so let's just do what he wants. They're not going to just decide that. He knew that. The Turtle has said that leading up to this, that Trump lost, he needs to just move on. So the plan was to gather this huge group of people at this rally to rile them up. Giuliani, we need to have a trial by combat. Point them at the Capitol
and say go
and walk away. And that is exactly what he did. And this result is exactly what he expected. And by all accounts, and they talked about this today during the trial, he was watching this on TV and happy with the results. It wasn't until other people around him made him make the video in which he half-heartedly tells people to go home and says that he loves them, and sent out tweets saying, oh no, we need to respect law enforcement, because people are telling him they're killing the Capitol Police. They're torturing and killing them. You need to do something about it. Oh, okay, I'll send out a tweet, I guess. You write it for me and just send it. That's fine. They talked about one Capitol police officer lost like 3 fingers.
One lost an eye.
Yeah, one's going to lose an eye. There's that video where the guy's literally screaming in pain.
Because they're getting crushed, I think.
And their defense was, well, come on, the Republicans are the party of law and order. And then they, talking about making all these out of context video clips. They literally took like 10 video clips of Trump while he's campaigning throughout the months leading up to the election, literally just saying the words law and order, and it would like cut away super fast. And they were comparing and saying, well, the Democrats are the real inciters of violence, showing Black Lives Matter protests and people defending those.
Which we knew was going to happen.
But it's so frustrating. And I didn't see her name, but there was someone who literally pointed out, like, this is sickening. We are literally talking about our children being murdered in the streets. And that's being equated to Trump not accepting the results of election. Like they're in any way equivalent. And they're not. And it should not, no one should try to defend this and say, well, yeah, you know, maybe we should walk back the rhetoric when we're talking about civil rights too. No, it is not the same. It is not equivalent. Protesting for your civil rights and to be treated as human beings by the police is not the same thing as protesting a conspiracy theory about the results of an election. They're not equivalent in any way, shape, or form.
And a couple other things that the Trump lawyers did bring up were they played footage from 2017 where Democrats voted to not certify several bits of election results because of the Russia interference allegations. And that was immediately knocked down by Representative Raskin, who basically just said, yeah, we were right to be, gavelled down. And
by Joe Biden, by the way.
By Joe Biden. And shocker, look what happened. We didn't lead an insurrection in the meantime.
Yes, it just shows that it's not just the fact that they wanted to make a show of objecting to the certification of the results. That happens. It's just political theater. That's not what incites a violent insurrection. 2000 was the most contentious election that we've had in my lifetime. That came down to a Supreme Court decision for who was going to be the president months after the election. It still did not lead to violent insurrection attempts. Why? Because neither Al Gore nor George W. Bush, say what you will about him, neither one of them riled up a fanatical base of their supporters to attack the Capitol.
And even though Al Gore was extremely disappointed and frustrated, which I think we should all be, he conceded the next day.
He followed every opportunity he had to dispute the election results, which, again, no one is saying that Trump shouldn't have done the same thing. No one's saying he shouldn't have filed 60-some lawsuits. Go for it. You want to spend your time and energy that way? That's your prerogative. We'll let the judges decide. And he lost every single one of those cases. That's fine. But don't go out in public and tell everybody that you have definitive proof of fraud in the election, and then in those same court cases, you tell the judges, no, we're not saying there's fraud. We're just saying there's election irregularities that you should look into. He's literally lying to people, and it's documented because they know there are legitimate consequences to lying to a federal judge. Which is why they weren't able to say, oh yeah, look at this movie that the My Pillow guy made. This proves there's fraud, judge.
It's shocking. You can't just make stuff up in a courtroom.
It wasn't intended to actually legally overturn the election results. It couldn't by inciting a riot. It was meant to physically force the senators to change their votes. And literally, who knows what would have happened had they not gotten those certified election results out of the Senate chambers. They were literally there in a box. If that gets destroyed, I don't know what you do because it's never happened before.
Yep.
And now you've got this whole question of, what do we do from here? Do we have to recertify all the individual state results? What's the precedent? That could have been an actual constitutional crisis. And it was minutes away from happening. And there were some very wise aides that helped get those out of the Senate chambers and get them secured.
So let's wrap up a couple of these other arguments that the Trump defense used. Like we talked about before, they tried to say the intent of the impeachment was just political opportunism, which is stupid. They tried downplaying the amount of far-right extremists during the January 6th riots, saying that Antifa was actually responsible. Great, I'm glad we have crazy nut job media posts.
More conspiracy theories.
Yeah, as an actual defense of the president. That's cool. And then, of course, the media was taking Trump out of context.
That's what you always say, right? Either it's taken out of context or he was really joking. He didn't say inject bleach.
Or you just don't understand what he was actually trying to say. Yes. It's all nonsense.
Ridiculous arguments.
And that's kind of where it leaves us now. As of right now, it's Friday night, and we are expected to see an actual final vote in the Senate about the conviction of Donald Trump sometime tomorrow or Saturday. So you probably already know the answer to that vote before we do, even though we probably already know it as well.
He's acquitted.
So even though we have our, 56 to 44, I think it was, the vote from last time.
I expect it to be something in the neighborhood of like 52 to 48.
I think so too. And one really good piece of evidence of that is something that the Washington Post just came out with today.
So during the hearings today, Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, who we had just talked about, flopped on the "is this constitutional to impeach Trump now that he's out of office" question and sided with Democrats and called himself an impartial juror, was seen holding a draft statement defending his Trump acquittal vote. As seen on the document, the events of January 6th are a stain on our country. President Trump and many others certainly contributed to that environment. The former president did engage in excessive and unnecessary rhetoric before and after the election. However, the House managers did not connect the dots to show President Trump knew that the attack on the Capitol was going to be violent and result in the loss of life.
I love the next part. You have to say the next part.
So it seems like he's made up his mind before the trial has even concluded.
Or did he?
Cassidy told reporters that he remained undecided and said the draft statement was not indicative of any final decision.
While holding it in his hand.
Quote, "If I flipped the page, you would have had the one going the other way." Is, of course, false. There is no. He was definitely just getting ready because he knew he would have to make a statement. He's probably been under fire ever since he changed his vote on the constitutionality of the trial to begin with.
I mean, the Louisiana Republicans called him out. What's he going to do now?
So to say, no, I just write both of them down and then I just throw one away when I make up my mind. Sure you do, Bill.
They're like the t-shirts for like both like football teams who like play in the Super Bowl.
So your Super Bowl 55 winning Kansas City Chiefs t-shirts.
Right. Oh my God. He's so dumb, making Louisiana proud.
And he thinks we're dumb as well.
Oh boy. So we don't expect anything to happen with this vote. In fact, we expect less votes to be had in this one because there's probably going to be more pressure to not actually vote to convict Trump. Because even though that he's not going to do anything anymore, hopefully, the Republican base is still full of Trumpers. And our Republicans still want to appease those Trumpers. And they care more about appeasing those crazy QAnon Trumpers than actually losing their election to Democrats.
Correct. Everybody wants to court the Trump base. The problem is, if Trump does what he says he's going to do and runs in 4 years, they're going to lose to him in the primary because they're not going to pick Ted Cruz over the rotting corpse of Donald Trump.
I am not going to have this. I was already told that the American people was smart enough to make the right decision to not elect Donald Trump again.
I don't think he would get elected personally. And again, I've talked about he's going to be quite old at that point. I really don't see him holding up for another run.
Do you think he can honestly have a good campaign when he's banned from Twitter?
I don't know what's going to... In 4 years, maybe they'll decide to unban him. I don't know. Or we'll probably be on to the next social media platform anyway.
Trump on TikTok, everybody. But that's all we have for now. We eagerly await the already assumed conclusion of this vote, just like the rest of you guys. So that's all we have, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. We hope to see you in the next episode. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at ThinkProPod. You can email us at thinkpropod@gmail.com. And remember, when in doubt, think progressively. Criminal indictions.
That's not even a real word.
For so many more years, Josh. Oh, I called you Josh. We spent more time on Gina fucking Carano.
I wanted to get that whole segment was put in there just so I could
to say the tweet.
just so I could complain about no one liking my hilarious tweet.
The saltiest, most selfish thing ever. I'm going to dedicate a podcast segment to this because no one appreciated my joke. You want to kind of start about like what Jamie Raskin was going through?
Sure. What state's he from?
Oh, Maryland, on the right side.
House impeachment manager, representative from Maine, or from Maryland. God damn it, I just looked at it.